Here's a story. Here's something. So the other day I get a call from a cousin who tells me that one of my other cousins posted a message on Facebook, right, about it's a long story. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but I'll tell you that my cousins, I grew up in the D.C. area. We'd be at my grandmother's house. She lived in Arlington, Virginia. Lived next door to this big old church, right? And we'd be in the yard playing and everything. And when you're a kid, for whatever reason, the game is always throwing rocks. You like to throw rocks. I don't know why. It's like to throw rocks. Okay? Yeah, boys, right? We just want to throw rocks. So my cousins are out there and they're throwing rocks, right? And everybody's trying to throw rocks over this church. Trying to throw rocks over the church, right? Now my cousins they're out there flinging. I'm like, oh man, they come from North Carolina, so I guess they threw a lot of rocks. So I don't know. That's not personal. I ain't from here, so I ain't grew up throwing rocks. So anyway, we're in the city, right? And so I'm out there and I'm trying to be like them. So I'm throwing rocks, boom, boom, and I hear a crash, right? So everyone's like, uh-oh, we all take off and run or whatever. And the people from the church, they knew to come over there because, my grandmother lived right next door or whatever. I guess they could see from where it hit that it had to have come from that way. So my family, they ended up having to pay for this window. Now mind you, all of my cousins and everything, none of us said, we never even really talked about who broke the window, right? All we knew is that one of us broke the window. I knew. I've been carrying this around for a long time. So I knew that I broke the window, right? So one of my cousins poses this question, and then one of my other cousins calls me and says, hey, did you see the question on Facebook? I'm like, no, I didn't see it. He's like, yo, so we need to figure out who broke that window. So I'm like, man, y'all knew I broke that window. Right? Now I've been hiding this thing for a long time because I don't know if I was still worried about the wrath of Ernestine Taylor or what. Now, I don't know. Okay? All I know is that sometimes we do the same thing with things that are a whole lot more serious than who broke a window. Yes. We hold things in ourselves so that because we think that if we tell someone, it's going to shade their perception on who we are. We're trying to cover up a stain that we have created, that we rightfully should take responsibility for and can be forgiven for, but we don't seem to recognize that we can actually be forgiven. Here Jesus says to Matthew, follow me. No questions asked. He don't stop Matthew like, whoa, wait a second now. Hold on now. Tell me, do you know the first 5 books of the Old Testament? He don't ask him any of those questions. He doesn't ask him, so have you really been stealing from your brothers and sisters here? He don't ask him any of that. He just says, follow me. Follow me. And the text says, Matthew got up and followed him. Now, that's what's really impactful about this thing, is that it would seem that Matthew has been hiding behind his tax collector's booth, trying to hide who it is that he really is. But he comes out at the first moment when someone accepts him at face value. The message in that is that the same thing can happen for us and happen for others when we stop trying to put up all of these sort of barriers to people being saved. Y'all know why we don't vote when people come down the aisles anymore? Did y'all realize that we don't do that anymore? That we don't even vote when people come down the aisles? You know why? Because at what point in time are we going to ever say no? We never say no to someone walking down the aisle to say they're going to give their life to Jesus Christ. But if we continue to do it, we still give the possibility And what does that do to folks that are still sitting in the pews trying to decide if they're going to walk down? No, I'm not going to do it, because if I do, they might just say no to me, even though they said yes to this person. We're talking about accepting folks for who they are. If Jesus can accept folks for who they are, then why is it that we act like we can't? So, page 121 and 122 of our text today, of our book, let me read some of this here. It says, Morgan asked, "Do you still love me?" My wife knelt down beside her on the floor and she whispered to our daughter, "Morgan, you could never make a big enough stain to keep me from loving you." I wish I could tell you that somehow we were able to get the stain out and make the couch white again. But that stain is still there. It will always be there, but a funny thing happened. Morgan started telling the story of the stained white couch. She likes to show people the stain and tell them what happened. Why? Because a stain that once represented shame and guilt and fear of rejection now represents love, grace, and acceptance. Do you know how we know about Matthew's past as tax collector? Do you know how we know that his friends were prostitutes, drunkards, and thieves? The reason we know all of that is because Matthew tells us. He calls us into the living room and shows us the stain on the couch and tells us the story of love and grace. Here it is. We're reading Matthew 9:9 comes from Matthew's book. This is his story in his own words. And basically a testimony. And basically what he's saying is that Jesus accepted me when nobody else accepted me. He accepted me so much that even when he did that, even after he accepted me and told me to follow him, he was invited to my house, and guess who was in the house? All the people that I rode with that wasn't right with everybody else. All the other tax collectors, all the other sinners were right there in the house, and they ate with him, with Jesus and his disciples. There is a message for New Hope. There's a message for New Hope. And the message is that we can't consider ourselves to be so holy that we can't extend a hand to folks who are outside the four walls of this church. Ministry is service, not just to each other. What Jesus models for us is ministry to folks outside the lines. Kendall's trying to learn how to color. And she's not coloring in the lines. But Daddy stayed trying to color in the lines. Just color in the lines. If she start going outside the line like she don't, she just don't care. She just colors, whatever. The whole page be orange. She's like, oh, wait a second. My want for her to color in the lines is my thinking that everybody should be able to color within the lines. And the problem is that many of us in the church believe that if you're going to be a believer, you have to fit within the lines.
Okay.
All right.
But the message is that everybody's coming different. At some point in time, you might fit within the lines that the Lord draws. Hear me. The lines that God draws himself, at some point we will fit within those lines. But you don't start there. And the moment that we keep thinking that we all start there, that's the moment that folks start because of disappointment in the fact that they're not meeting expectations that aren't even God's expectations. It's important to be open and honest with others about the hidden stains that exist within our lives, because that's our acknowledgement that we didn't always stay in the line. That we didn't come in the church all of a sudden doing all the stuff we're doing. It's a process. Here's another example. So, when people buy homes, there's research on this, and I believe, actually Deacon Chris probably brought this up a few weeks ago at the men's ministry meeting when we were going through the workshop, Dave Ramsey's workshop, right? And we talked about how when people have these, these homes that they buy, that when they buy the homes, they want to fill the home like the home that they grew up in. Right? So when you buy a home, because you grew up in a house that mama had all this stuff and all that, then you do everything you can to try to fill it up like mama had it. Like the home that you're coming from. Okay? And we do that because we think in our minds that that's what makes us legitimate in terms of having a home. When it took mama 35 years to accumulate all that stuff. But we want it right now.
And we kill ourselves to get it.
And we kill ourselves to get it. And it's the same mindset of believers in the church. We have folks that will join the church, and because we are not open and honest about where it is that we've really come from, people look at us and they're like, I gotta be like him, or I gotta be like her. And the whole time it's a setup. Because their faith hadn't even grown that much yet. Hadn't even grown enough to support that sort of life. It's a process, and we have to be real about the stains that exist. Because when we do, those who are on the outside will move on the outside to the inside. Now there are some groups. The author brings out in his book, just so that you all kind of understand where this comes from. It's coming from the text in Matthew with Jesus having the sinners and the tax collectors in his own home. Okay? There are some groups within our congregation, within our church, or within our society that have these kind of asterisks, right? And that comes from this. He brings up how we have this, maybe we have this sort of thing we put out that we say everybody's welcome here, right? Everybody's welcome here. And when in truth, when everyone walks through the door, there's some folks that we kind of like, oh, wait a second now. Now I know we said everyone, but we meant everyone who dressed this way.
Right.
Or I know we said everyone, but we meant everyone who smelled this way.
Right.
Okay? I know we said everyone. We talking about everyone who presents a certain kind of way. So I asked the question on your sheet tonight about what asterisks exist. Are there any that exist? And I want you, if you don't keep it real, then we don't grow.
Right.
So you have to be real about it. Matter of fact, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to turn to the people behind you so that you can talk about the asterisks that exist. Are there any groups of people that you know of that may be affected by the existence of the asterisks? And we're not talking about examples that we may have already seen, but we're also talking about in our own mindset of what we know about New Hope Missionary Baptist Church, right? what we know about New Hope Missionary Baptist Church, if a certain type of person walked in here, would there be looks? Would there be folks moving down in the pew? Would there be folks getting up trying to find other places to sit? You got 3 minutes.